Hey, welcome everyone to this session on the future of the law school casebook. My name is gkoo, and I am the Berkman Fellow at CALI. I'm also the CALI Fellow at Berkman at Harvard. And John will also be on this panel, and we're hoping that this will be an open conversation about where the casebook is heading. And of course, we're going to be pushing our own little agenda around the E. Langdell project that's now underway. That's us. Now, I don't actually, before I even ask the preliminary question of whether you use casebooks in your, how many of you are instructors or professors, just so I can just feel like who's in the room? Okay, great. And technologists? Librarians? Okay, great. So, so maybe I'll just, instead of having people do a show of hands, we'll just run through some of these preliminary questions that we had asked actually at a previous session on the future of legal education where we had a room full of professors and basically asked, have you ever contributed, have you ever authored a casebook, have you ever contributed to one? And you kind of would see people, more and more hands would obviously go up because a lot of people have thought about writing a casebook, but of course only a very small handful of people have ever written one. I will ask this last question, which is what else do you use besides a casebook to teach? For those of you who are teaching classes. You can't simply be using a casebook, right? So, yep.
We use an internet as online activities.
Great, great.
For instance, to be more specific, I mean, just sending off Lexus and Westlaw, or?
No, well, we have a technology-based clinic that's about law practice, so we have to cobble stuff together from all kinds of places. Very, very little of it is really basics of Westlaw, that kind of stuff. So it's really online articles, different sites that we want them to visit that demonstrate various concepts that we have. So most of it's really on the free web.
Mm-hmm. And you got to check it every semester because it might go away, you know, links might be dead or something like that. Is there...
Yeah, and we're actually moving it now from this proprietary intranet system into a learning management system that's so easier to use.
Which learning management system?
Excuse me?
Which learning management system? The open?
Claro. Claro.
Claro.
What else? Does anybody else use any other resources? Yep.
I think a lot of it is statute books.
Okay. So the statute books that basically are just the statutes and maybe the legislative history. Okay. Just the statutes. Okay. Yep.
I use a lot of handouts for cases that I don't choose to be in the casebook or when I find one that's in the casebook, I think they're going to write out.
When you do that, do you do a handout each time, or do you kind of collect them all in the beginning of the semester and you have to?
I personally collect them all at the beginning of the semester, and I just have one thing to the top of it's PDF and I download it screen with them all.
Okay, so it's.
Here in the
Yep.
back.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, if you just say a little loud.
I make one handout at the beginning of the semester, and it's got everything that I'm going to use throughout the semester.
So it's kind of like do you use course packs basically, or do people no longer do those where you kind of do a bound in some cheap way, a kind of big stack of? Is anybody still using those, or is that kind of yesterday's news?
So mine's online.
Yours online? Oh wow! So everybody's got electronic here. Great. Okay.
You mean your statutes are online, or your
No,
course pack?
the course back and the handouts and all that.
All right. That's great to know.
Is it online as an HTML or online as a PDF?
It's a doc and a PDF.
Do you think students mostly print them out, or they don't mostly print them out?
Depends on the course.
Great. So we're looking into what's kind of changing in the market. You probably all know all of this, so I'll just go through this very quickly. Those of you who are teaching need the best teaching materials, and all of you have already identified the law is changing really quickly, and there's so much information out there that it can be overwhelming. What we see is that everybody has materials to share, and there's really a limited capacity for you to be able to share them with each other. And you're also in the process right now of remixing materials that are coming in from other places, whether it's you're sending it to each other on listservs or just kind of just by accident you talk to somebody who says, oh, wait, have you seen this particular article? It's really great for teaching. but that's all by coincidence and chance, and so it's rather inefficient. We're looking for a way to make that easier and faster for teachers to be able to teach better. And as all you are all identifying already, the content is increasingly digital. I think this is the year of open content in law. It's been amazing how much has now finally been released to the public domain outside of the proprietary databases. We're going to see, I think, a torrent of that in the next few years. So we're really seeing the future of open digital content being out there. So digital content is everywhere. We need to start talking about what happens next from an educational standpoint, not just from, okay, now all of this case law and statutes, they're all out there, but now what? How do we make that enhance education? How do we get that so that it's within context of learning experiences and not just floating in either space? We're also seeing on the user end improving digital readers. As a lot of people are saying, students aren't necessarily even reliant on paper anymore, are very happy to engage with digital resources without having to print. Not necessarily unhappy with just basically reading PDFs on a computer. So we're getting to the point maybe where the Kindle could be, or some descendant of the Kindle could be the way that your students are going to be getting their course materials. And in some ways, probably the most important thing that's happening right now is how we're going from the web being a place where you get information to the web being a place where people connect with people. And when you think about what education is really about, it's not the idea that you just put a lot of information out there and people magically download it into their head. A lot of the education that's happening, and the reason why we have professors and haven't fired everybody and just replaced it all with just online lectures and CALI lessons, although maybe that's our agenda, is that those relationships are absolutely important. The relationship between the professor and the student, the relationship between student and student, those are really the aspects of the education that your students are paying for, not getting a whole pile of books and video lectures and things like that. So what we're seeing on the web right now is a shift from information being the basis of the web to those relationships. That's absolutely critical for our educational agenda, for us to be able to support the building of those relationships, and that's what we're looking to do as well. Of course, overall, we're getting into this realization that so much of what's happening is remixing, taking what other people have done, improving it, whether it's through Wikipedia, and kind of everybody building on the same kind of base of content, or whether it's taking even music and remixing it. We believe that the same thing will be true for casebooks, that the time is now for remixing casebooks so that we can have better casebooks. We don't have to have kind of these lockdown proprietary books anymore. It's going to be about everybody collaborating to build a better casebook. So what we see, what our vision is that law professors are going to be able to create and to share top quality course materials in an open environment, and that you'll be able to find that material easily and quickly. And I think very importantly that professors will receive recognition for excellence in developing teaching materials. I think this is very important, and it's one of the maybe subtle agendas that we have in this is that as we begin to show people that there's kind of, you can get, in a sense, points. You get points in SSRN, right, for every hit that you get on your article. We want to be able to do the same thing for excellent teaching materials. We want to be able to recognize, look, this particular edit of this case together with the commentary running alongside of it, that's a great resource for teaching. We want to be able to quantify that and show you that's a great resource and give you the rewards for seeing that people are using your materials. So that's one of the things that we really would like to have move forward, is the ability to recognize objectively the excellent materials that professors are developing, and in that way help support professors each supporting each other in their commitment to teaching and being able to develop good teaching materials. So just a quick description of where we are right now is that we're kind of in this position where we're all consumers. We're consumers, we buy books, and we look at it as books are these products that you buy off of a shelf, and we're kind of all locked into buying those materials. As a couple of you mentioned, none of those materials are perfectly well suited for you, but you spend a lot of time and energy kind of not, if you don't like a particular way that the book edited, the authors of the book edited the case, you've got to go and spend time editing it yourself and supplementing. So we're kind of all locked into this closed product model where you can't really contribute to the way that it works for you. And instead, what we really want to see, so we're kind of all locked into these separate communities. If you use a particular casebook, if two people are teaching property but you're using entirely different casebooks, that's kind of a dividing line between you. And what we want to see instead is to open this up and to recognize that if we're teaching property, we're all teaching property, and we're kind of connected to each other in different ways than just, I use this book and you use that book. We have different ways of looking at this information that could be really helpful to each other. So here's where we see the future of authorship in terms of casebooks. If you take the universe of all law professors in the world, there's a whole bunch of people who have been thought about creating a casebook, right? Probably almost every professor at some point looks at a casebook and says, I could do better than this. So a lot of people have thought about doing a casebook. And maybe a few people have then gone ahead and gone and edited a few cases, which maybe they sent along to an author and said, hey, here's something that could include in your next edition, or here's something I'm going to just put in a course pack and photocopy for my students. Maybe a few people have then gone on to write a chapter, a couple of chapters, and on the way towards publishing a casebook, and in fact gone ahead and completed that, but very, very few ever get around to publishing the casebook. And so when you look at this kind of universe of all the law professors in the world who could be creating educational materials, we have all of these authors who could be contributing who are lost. And what we're trying to do is bring them back, or at least bring most of them back, by lowering the threshold of what it means to contribute to a casebook. With the e-Langdell system that we're developing, editing a few cases is going to be a big, huge contribution. It's no longer going to be something that you keep on your own hard drive, make photocopies for your students, maybe email to some of the people that you know, and that's about it. You'll actually be contributing to the larger repository of teaching materials that somebody can take that edited case, replace the one that they don't like in a casebook, and put that one in. That's where we're heading, so that we can take all this really great creative energy that's out there and harness it for everybody's collective benefit. So can it work? And I don't think I need to go through this with this particular crowd. Of course it can work. We've seen it work with open source software. We've seen it work with Wikipedia. We're even seeing it work in other textbook markets in the K-12 and college level with the Connections Project at Rice, where they are doing open source casebooks, and actually publishers are also publishing those open source casebooks. So there's a new world that we're already seeing, and in law, in some ways, we're really well ahead of where the other publications and other areas of teaching are, because a lot of our stuff is, to begin with, non-proprietary. It's already open content. It's law and legislation, and also conveniently, a lot of it is text. So we don't have to deal with all sorts of really fancy graphics and everything that you do with science textbooks. So if it can work with K-12 science textbooks, then we absolutely believe that it can work with legal casebooks. So here are the things that we basically need to make sure that we have, is that we look at communities that have a culture of sharing with each other. So what we'd love to talk about with you is where might we start? What are some of the kind of small communities of law professors who are already collaborating very closely together, and where this isn't going to be a huge culture shock to say, hey, maybe we can work together on building a collaborative open source casebook. Where is that? There is, as I said before, our materials in particular, easy to share and modify. We're also looking for people. Maybe some of you in this room who would be willing to lead a community to start creating these casebooks together. We need people who are going to be dedicated to this to basically pull their peers along. And of course, we're going to be offering the technology that's going to work. So very quickly, how does it work? Just a writ, mix, learn here, where you start out with a case, as you always do, right? And you edit, you redact it down to the parts that you want, and you kind of distill it down to the case that you need, pop it into our database. And then you have a whole list of cases. I mean, this is when you look at a casebook, you look at a syllabus, and it's not just cases, of course, it's also articles, all sorts of other materials, and you basically take that, edit it down, and you stick it into the mix. And basically when you look at your syllabus, when you look at a casebook, it's a collection of materials in some kind of sequence. And what we want to be able to let you do is to change that sequence. Take one of the cases you don't like, take it out and replace it with something else. That's where we're heading here with this kind of mixing idea. And then we're not particularly wedded to any one delivery mechanism. We think that any kind of way that your students want to get the materials at the end of the day is going to work. Whether they'd be happy to read the electronic version on their computer, that's great. If at some point a product like the Kindle becomes really usable for students to be able to read their casebooks, to read their materials on there, that'll be great too. If people want to print it out or send it off to one of the micro presses and have it bound so it looks like a traditional casebook so they can impress their friends by having it on the bookshelf, that's great as well. That's absolutely possible, and it will still be cheaper than the existing proprietary casebooks, even if they had it perfectly bound with all the gilded lettering and all of that. So we're agnostic about what the end product's going to look like for the students. What we're really concerned with right now is how you, the professors and teachers and instructors, are going to be able to share the materials with each other and to be able to create the best casebooks possible, and then be able to enable as many options for the students as possible at the other end. So what we would like to just ask everybody, and this is partly directed at the instructors and teachers in the room, but also just more generally, is what's exciting and about this for you in terms of what could be possible, and also what concerns you. What are some of the risks that you see, and how can we help mitigate them? And specifically, what would you be personally interested in being involved with as we move forward? At this point, that's basically all I have to say. I don't know if, John, you had more to add to this particular presentation.
I'll jump in at various points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything specific right this moment.
Great. So, did you have a...
Yeah, something you said concerned me a little bit in terms of what concerns you about this endeavor. You said, I think, that a lot of the material is text, so you don't have to worry about delivering a bunch of fancy graphics or anything like that. That seems to me to be conceding that you're going to offer the same lousy products that the current legal publishers are offering. Seems like one of the whole benefits of this would be the ability to offer the fancy graphics, the hyperlinking, and all that stuff, instead of just the straight text that you see in most Casebooks.
Sure. There's no reason why we wouldn't. And in fact, if we don't need to worry about publishing to paper, there's no reason why we wouldn't be sharing video, multimedia, rich multimedia. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm trying to visualize the professor's experience in approaching this. I guess one could go to it and say, okay, I want to teach Bush versus Board of Canvassers, so I'm going to go to Elaine Dell, and my alternatives there are I'm going to see 8 different professors' own distillations of them to see whether any of them are suitable to me, glance through, finding none, can go to the original and make my own, and it becomes number 9. Is that pretty much basically it?
Well, that would be the building from the bottom up approach, yes. I mean, what we're expecting to do initially is also be doing from top down and bringing in entire casebooks. So
let me add that if it's if you have 8 choices, that would be, I would consider that a victory on our part that there's 8 people that have contributed 8 different ways of looking at that one case. If I have a main worry, it's that faculty don't care enough about teaching to participate in this project, even at a micro piece of project, one case at a time sort of way. But if there's enough people contributing, then theoretically it's like an eBay reputation system. So of those 8, some of them are going to have 5 stars, some of them have 3 stars. Or of those 8, some are going to be from top 20 or 30 schools, some are going to be from not top 20 schools. And the instructor will, if time is of the essence, make a decision based on reputational signals, such as ranking or the perceived reputation of the school or of the person themselves who did the editing.
Well, let me address that in a different way. If there's 8 different edits, there's any given, the different communities that we see out there in terms of why does anybody buy a particular casebook. You obviously are all teaching, let's say, the same topic, property. There's different ways that you would look at the law. So you might choose a particular casebook because you agree with that substantive view of the law. You also might choose that casebook because you agree with that particular way of teaching. So you take those 2 kinds of factors and you end up with different reasons why you might choose a casebook. The same would be true for any given case. You look at any given resource, whether it's a case or not a case. What is it trying to teach? So you could take any given case and it could be about, you could distill from it the civil procedure aspects of it. You can distill from it the ethical aspects of it. You can distill from it the different substantive aspects of it. So that might be one reason why you'd have 8 different edits. And another would be, I like to teach in a particular way, so I'm going to highlight this particular set of factors rather than that particular set of factors. What we want to be able to do in the technology is for you to be able to distinguish, why did I make this particular set of edits? I made this particular set of edits because I'm trying to teach civil procedure and it's to first-year students versus I'm trying to teach a fairly advanced concept of evidence for a more advanced course. That's entirely different reasons why you're editing the case, and so those would be different reasons why you would choose to put that into your materials.
Yeah, and a lot more than just 8 different edited versions of that case. You might have an introduction to the case, you might have background material, you might have comments and questions. If you're somebody who uses a problem method, you might have 3 or 4 problems. So you pick one of those problems, you pick a couple of questions, and it's not, I don't think it's just, personally, I think there's only, some of the cases, there's only 2 or 3 ways you can really end the case. So a few sentences here or there. But it's all that other stuff that I'd like to pull.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in other words, the meta information, one of the values you're saying of this system is that there will be a taxonomy that can be applied to other materials. So sets of problems, multimedia materials. Somebody did a podcast on it, or somebody did a class on it and recorded it. And if you so desire, you want to listen to it. That flips back into the value to the student. I'm using a traditional casebook. I'm having trouble with a particular part. I go to eLangdell, and what's available in the public site might be material that I could use that would supplement my own study. And the reason why I hold this book up is Clayton Christensen says that that's the future of all education, that students need to construct their own learning or be delivered learning to themselves based on their dominant intelligence, Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. That the problem with teaching today is the monolithicness, if that's a word, of the current models that we have. I don't know if that's true, but I see where he's going with that.
Where's the reward for how do authors who contribute to this, what is the reward? I mean, right now they're getting royalties if they do a casebook.
How many of you are there any of you actual authors right now of the casebook? Okay, what is your current financial reward, if you don't mind sharing? Is that
Millions of dollars. You haven't seen the Mercedes out there?
Right.
It's the right books.
I mean, it's under $10,000 a year.
I mean, there's a handful who make a lot of money, right? But most that I've talked to are more in.
What's the reward for teaching right now?
Well, that's the point, John. It's not. Let's put the royalty thing out of the equation there, because you're not going to make any money from this, right? You're spreading a social good or whatever you want to call it. There still has to be a reward.
Absolutely.
Does reward spreading social good? Is that enough, or does reward some recognition in your school that this contribution has some value toward promotion and tenure, which is another reward? Or is the reward that you're spreading your theories to the rest of legal education? But there has to be some reward, in my view, for anybody to participate.
My hope is that the first reward is going to be entirely selfish. You need to assemble this thing anyway, right? So what we're building is a system that will be, we hope, the easiest way for you to assemble your course packs and materials, even if it had no extrinsic reward for anybody else in the system. That's one of the things we've got to be able to do, is that you would use this even if you couldn't use it to share with your peers. So that's absolutely the first thing that we want to be able to enable, is that this is so easy to use that it's the awesomest way to do it, period. It's solving your pain right now of collecting materials right now and putting them together in some format that your students will use. That's the first reward. The second is that we want to be able to build into this, and we would love any feedback if you think that this is a dangerous or stupid idea, some kind of ability to measure how much value you're contributing. If you contribute an edit of a case or a particular set of problems or questions, and a whole bunch of your peers start using it, we want you to get recognition for that. We don't want to punish you for putting bad stuff in there, right? But
what's the recognition?
That's what kind of recognition do you think would work? I mean, at a minimum, it would be something like SSRN, where we would show how many people are using your stuff. Download counts or usage counts, right? I mean, just as a...
Wait. Shake your head. And I agree with you, because it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was just on the front of the
New York Times.
New York Times, for God's sake. And I know there are faculty who are directing their librarians to remove papers from the local repository, so that the only place to download it is SSRN, so that increases the SSRN download counts. Which, of course, is quite silly. If Dick Gaynor or Ted Hirsch were in the room, would say, we tried that too, but we found out that when you put the paper in more than one place, you actually get an increase in download counts both places. Anyhow. So, it's silly, but it works.
I mean, it's just one...
Why don't we go with the start? Why don't we go with a broken reputation system and build our way towards an unbroken one, or a better, more nuanced one?
And the truth is it going to help you get tenure? That's way beyond our control, right? I mean, that's within each school's own kind of internal politics, but we at least can provide some measure, some feedback, some karma that's measurable, that people are using your materials. And I think that's the start. And if you have suggestions about how to improve on that, we would love to take those and run with it.
The other thing is, how do you do? I mean, most casebooks today have lots of copyrighted materials within those casebooks that permissions have been gotten. How do you deal with that?
We're working through that with a number of approaches. I don't know if you want to talk about. One of these is a fairly aggressive fair use policy. Another is that this is a closed system, so it's to a large extent the only people who are using this e-Langdell are going to be at law schools. And so there's kind of a good question as to whether basically everybody would have access to almost everything that you would put into e-Langdell in one form or another anyway. So we're looking into that possibility. Another is that if we have to pay people for usage, then we might have to do that at some point. But I mean, what kinds of... Yeah.
You skipped one.
Yeah.
The most aggressive thing is to move the community towards using open access materials versus...
Yeah, I was going to ask what kinds of materials are at this point not open access anymore. We basically...
We're now are going towards basically creating commons license kind of server.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Harvard just... That's why I was saying this is the year of open access, because even if it's only a handful of schools, it's the beginning of the tide.
No, it's much harder. It's like the Time Magazine and Newsweek are.
Well,
Or worse, the AD.
Yeah, New York Times.
Yeah, the Associated Press.
Or my parent company, Washington Post.
And I think one of the inherent problems too is if you're doing this, you're doing it for repeated semesters, so you have that routine usage across the years, which is one of the enemies of fair use.
Which breaks fair use, exactly.
No, I would argue strongly against that. I don't think that breaks fair use at all. But we don't have to get into a fair use. Let's not get into fair use discussion right now. Sorry, I'm at Berkman, and we have a really aggressive fair use attitude. So, yeah.
Well, on the reward issue, it doesn't take much of a reward for a lot of this because it's content that's already being created. And all you have to do is give people enough of an incentive to post the handouts, the edit cases that we're all doing for our individual courses. So that's not going to take much of an effort, I hope, and so it's not going to take much of a reward to get people to do it.
Yeah, we hope not. And I think one of the most important things is that we would like to start from having extant casebooks already in the system. So we're starting to talk to people. Some professors have retained their electronic rights if you were kind of negotiating savvily with your publisher. Some people have done that. We have some casebooks that haven't made it to the starting gate yet, and the publishers themselves are kind of twiddling their thumbs saying, when are we going to get to see something? And they're arguing to the publisher, if you want to see something, put this into the open system, and then we'll get people to help us finish it, because we've gotten halfway there, we can't cross the finish line, we can't do it. And that's a real loss to the community. One of them is the cyber law casebook that a lot of the professors at Berkman are trying to author. They've gotten literally halfway there, and they're really, really looking forward to putting this into the e-Langdell system. Suddenly you're going to have a cyber law casebook that the whole cyber law community can build together. So we're looking for those kinds of 75% of the casebook not quite there yet opportunities. And if any of you are in that position, we'd love to talk with you about what that might mean to make that happen. We're also looking at doing what I'm calling the negative casebook. So basically everybody who uses a particular casebook has the same needs in terms of what's not in that casebook. So we're looking at kind of building communities of the negative space around that casebook. Everybody who uses that casebook gather around and share the resources that are specifically not in this casebook, so that you kind of build the kind of common repository of supplementary materials for this casebook. That would be another way for us to get started. I don't know if that's of any interest.
Paul, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What is the casebook market in the UK? I mean, do you assign casebooks, or do you assign teaching materials that's mostly created by your instructors or by, you know what I'm saying?
It's a different culture in the UK, but it's got really intriguing kind of parallels as it were. We don't have casebooks in the way that you guys have casebooks, largely because of an issue that I raised yesterday, and that is our signature pedagogy just doesn't have casebooks as a necessary item in it, because we have so many variable forms of lectures. But you've got kind of a pedagogy around which you build Socratic questioning, forms of the lecture theatre, the casebook, all of those are kind of elements built in there. Used variously in various institutions, that's true. Ours are much, much more variable. So our casebooks aren't casebooks as such.
They're more like textbooks.
They're more like textbooks, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the textbooks are much more secondary, treated as secondary resources, as it were. But I mean, the same arguments that you're putting forward here as regards casebooks apply just as much to textbooks actually in the UK, with the same sort of problems as far as people thinking their way around those IP issues, for example, reputational issues, access issues, and all the rest of it. But I mean, just taking your comment there in negative sense, that's precisely one of the many issues that we have to face in the UK, because most folk looking around for some kind of a book, whether it's a skills textbook or a mainstream substantive law, family law, whatever, we'll be looking at that and thinking, there's a lot of stuff there, and nothing really does what I want it to do, and they'll pick the best for their purposes of what they probably consider to be a relatively bad bunch, although they're all pretty outstanding authors and all the rest of it, just doesn't fit their course. So that kind of community of practices of their approach to what you can that we can build around it is I think an ideal way of approaching that problem and of actually making materials a lot better for staff generally.
Mm-hmm. The other reason why I brought you into the conversation was the production of materials in e-Langdell can be very small pieces, or can overlap with the production of materials needed for simple simulations. So if a simulation needs a bunch of bill of ladings as examples, or needs a bunch of titles of houses or of cars or something like that, and people produce those could also then become available as artifacts inside of a casebook, perhaps even as multimedia or graphic elements that most casebooks wouldn't naturally have to be shared between and amongst the community. So I see, and Jean and I even argued about putting the word casebook in the title of this talk, or even in any of our discussions about e-Langdell, because it's not a casebook anymore. It's a collection or a collation of materials, and the casebook has exploded as a result of that.
I totally agree. In fact, Patrick Wiseman's session earlier today really showed that kind of evolution, as it were, of his materials from a basic HTML page way back in the mid-90s, as it were, to something that was way, way more sophisticated. Martha and this podcast and what else shows just what you can actually do when you take that technology seriously. And you're absolutely right. The book becomes irrelevant. It's not. You're just going way beyond the casework. But I mean, I think it's quite important to just introduce people to the idea that we still have some kind of a book there, so they can produce a book if we want. But the vast majority of students and staff will be moving well beyond the book, no question.
Do you all understand that? I mean, we still feel like we have to produce a book, even to the part of whatever part of it can be turned into text and then can be sent off to print on demand, and therefore, or a PDF and then printed. We feel like that's a necessary part of this project to convince people that we're not doing something so totally crazy that they can't accept it.
Because at least you have something to display in the little glass case in the front of the wall.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to a really old story. We a long time ago, when with CALI authors, we used to give them a plaque, or we still do. We give CALI authors a plaque that's got the CD upon which the first lesson that they wrote, and it's called the CALI Grammy. And the reason was we wanted something in their office that they could point to that was an indicator of their publication with CALI. And I visited several authors over the years and seen the plaques hanging in their office, hopefully proudly or something like that. Which leads to a second story. Had an author who wanted to use the fact that he or she had authored a bunch of CALI lessons with a promotions and tenure committee, and they were unimpressed with the CD, which of course is only this big. So we took her 12 lessons, printed them out. They came out to about 800 pages, stuck them in a 3-ring binder, and then she gave that to the P&T committee, and they went, "Oh my goodness, what a publication this is." Now, it didn't ultimately affect whether she got her promotion, which she did get eventually, but it was clear that the pile of paper, that was dumped on the table had an impact, and the CD didn't. So,
from the student's perspective, though, I'm wondering if there is some sort of element in which the sort of linearity of a book is kind of a way of measuring time or a way of measuring achievement. In other words,
how do you measure infinity?
Yeah, all your stuff is here. You go from here to here, and then you've read it all, but all of your stuff is here and here and here and here.
Well, that's the problem with existing casebooks, right? I mean, since when do you ever read the whole casebook, right? No one ever does that.
Right.
You don't even do it in the right order. You go from chapter 5 to chapter 2 to chapter 7. So it's already a problem with existing. If anything, we're actually going to produce a linear casebook now in a way that's not possible.
You're right, though. There is a problem of inflation here. When an instructor is saying, read pages 27 to 37, they know they've assigned 10 pages in a standard-sized book. Whereas if they're throwing stuff up on Patrick Wiseman's Rich Syllabus website, you could be assigning hundreds or thousands of apparent, pages of materials, but it doesn't feel that way because it's all sort of ephemeral.
Yeah, but there's another issue there, and that is that the instructor is thinking, well, my students at this stage in the course really ought to be able to understand pages 27, 37, but maybe a lot of students don't, so they're going to have to read it because they don't have that prior benchmark level of understanding there, so they're going to have to read elsewhere in the book and all the rest of it. The students are really savvy at that. They really don't understand this. How am I going to get this information? I'll get it from that. It's better to have the information applicably on those pages than to have to scurry around the library and try and get these really basic bits of information put together so you can understand what's going to do.
Or is it better? Go ahead, Conrad.
I have to say that having given them the online materials for so long now, that I have been struck by the number of students who come back and say, I'm looking for something more finite. It would help me if it were more finite. And even when we call ourselves doing them a favor by saying, look, we're not asking you to read this administrative agency's combined work, but to get a sense of what's on there so that you get a sense of how government is moving in this direction. That's easy for us to say. It's not necessarily so easy for them to do. And so there is some set of instructions that, I will speak for myself, would have to be clearer about when we give different kinds of material.
You're my teacher, teach me. Give me some instruction.
Well,
not just let me flail about too much.
There is something to the linearity of it. There is something to the value added of of here's how I see it fitting in with other things. There is something to the finiteness of it. There is something to the offlineness of it that appeals in many ways to people that we may be getting past as technology moves forward and screen resolutions improve and size and weight and all that other stuff become less of an issue. But it's still there right now, and to ignore it, I think, may come back to haunt.
I hope we're not going past it. I think one of the things that we're emphasizing here, which is a very kind of soft critique of the whole web as educational view, which is information torrents will somehow be self-educating. What you're saying, I think, is that the role of the teacher, the role of the author is to guide learning, and whether you use the word linearity or whether you use some other word, the idea is that your expertise is to help students move through a process, have an experience that ends up at a particular result, and that in some cases, funneling them along a narrow path can be more effective for them than kind of letting them raise everywhere. And so what we want to be able to do, and why we still do to some extent use the word casebook, is that at least in your head, the metaphor of the book, where the finiteness of the book still applies. We're not trying to say, this is overlay on the whole web. What we're saying is we're helping you build a guided experience the same way as a book or a syllabus.
Can I ask Steve a quick question? Do you guys assign casebooks?
Yeah, that's one of the things that drives me crazy about being at Concord is we've been assigning casebooks.
No, it's not a stupid thing at all, because it's
Well, it's a
so you make them go out and buy a book, which they then have locally, right? But you got to be thinking about how do we electronically deliver that, right?
That's why I come back to the reason I raise this is because you constantly talk to the casebook people, the West and Aspens and the Lexuses of the world, use whatever electronic means they can use in Catholic Scribe or Vital Source or wherever they can.
Yeah.
Because we have a bunch of airline pilots, and they, as they're sitting there doing nothing in the airplane, which is typically what they do, they like to read their cases, but they don't want to carry about
This is too much information.
But yeah, it's a big problem. We have 1,400 students, none of whom would buy a physical casebook if they didn't have to. If they had an option, they would buy something else.
So
That they buy more of than casebooks, and I think this is true in all law schools, are supplemental.
Mm-hmm. All right.
More books and
I'm sorry, Scott I interrupted him.
I was going to ask you about assessment, because obviously what's missing from the casebook is any kind of assessment materials. Is this something that you think of providing on eLangdell, a pool of resources that the instructor could use to assess?
Without confusing what eLangdell, the branding is going to stand for, and by the way, there's no.
Yeah, we got our federal trademark.
The overall system is fundamentally a way to share materials and resources. And one particular way of looking at it is a way to construct Facebook. But clearly, what we hope people are going to start seeing is that, look, we can share anything. So we can share video, we can share, why can't we share exams?
Multiple choice questions.
So we will be able, one thing that's going to be possible is building the teacher's version of the book. Because we in CALI know whether you're a professor or not, or whether you're not a student, I guess, is really more important. So I think we're going to get to that point. Right now, I'm not to confuse people. We want to start throwing the whole kitchen sink in, want to limit it to, okay, here's something you understand. But absolutely, there's no reason why you can't share anything, including video, audio, text, exams, simulations, whatever.
Hi, Gene. You spent a half an hour in the conference room looking for you. Sorry I showed up late. The way I actually have a couple questions. The first one is, the way I understand eLangdell is that it's kind of this Web 2.0 platform where different content from various sources is sucked in. The question I have is, how do you guys solve the taxonomy issue in organizing some of the information? So it's really useful.
Two ways. One is we have our own taxonomy that we've developed for our own lessons, which is basically they're each organically built by law professors who wrote the lessons. And then the second is an ad hoc taxonomy system that's parallel. So in other words, people can delicious tag things their own way, and so you can search on either. So you can use a taxonomy built by experts, in this case, law professors, or you can use a taxonomy provided by crowdsourcing.
So it would work like if you were teaching a torts class, for example. You might have intentional torts underneath that. You have a series of pedagogical subcategories like battery, assault, and then you'd have a series of materials like cases, articles, videos. Is that
right? And to some extent, also, the textbooks themselves provide an actual taxonomy. The chapters and headings and subheadings are all taxonomy. So immediately when we start plugging in entire casebooks that already exist, the taxonomy comes with that.
Yeah, and may I, John?
Sure.
The taxonomy stuff we're using is actually pretty sophisticated because we're allowed to have, as John said, sort of controlled vocabularies that we create, as well as free tag and keyword type stuff that folks are putting stuff on the site are using to tag the stuff. And what the software that we're using, which is Drupal, has really sophisticated taxonomy control software already built into the system. So it allows us to build multiple hierarchical vocabularies. So in other words, we can have a term that exists essentially in two places at once. So that if you're looking for something that falls both into evidence and criminal law, for example, you can find it either through evidence or criminal law. It's not going to be sort of a mutually exclusive thing. Right now, the way that our stuff is organized tends to be mutually exclusive. We tend to pick one subject heading for a lesson. It is an evidence lesson. And sometimes it might be hard to find that if you come at it looking for, well, criminal procedure is a good example there. Because there's a lot of stuff in our lessons that might deal with criminal procedure, but because we haven't actually created criminal procedure lessons, it made them hard to find. The taxonomy system in Drupal, as we build the vocabularies and tag the content, will allow us to have those hierarchical situations. And the interface that we're developing on top of that essentially allows for drill down type stuff. So you pick a topic, you pick subtopics, you can pick related topics, and you can do keyword searches all the way through it, and you'll be able to find things. So we're very aware of those sorts of things.
second question I have might be a little bit offensive to some people, but we run a service called Courtroom Connect, and we have two websites that are content oriented. The first one is audio case files, which you know about. And the second one is Courtroom Live, where we have 40,000 hours of trial video. And at any time we're out recording like 5 or 6 top trials around the country. And we have a wealth of I mean, in any year we record almost twice as much as CNN records a year, just to give you an idea of kind of the breadth of what we cover. We're undergoing a project with William & Mary where they're going through the video.
With who?
William & Mary.
Oh, William & Mary, okay.
Yeah, the trial ad professors are going through the video and they're adding metadata, tagging it. I'd love to make my content available through Eli & Dell.
For free?
Yeah, that's the problem, is it?
Thank you. This is great. Wow, fantastic.
I mean, I have 50 employees that wouldn't, be.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, so the problem is how do we monetize? Our primary revenue stream is obviously the revenues we generate from law firms, but it's tough for us to just give away the video clips. I mean, how could we potentially, and how do other services monetize some of the content that they've spent quite a bit of effort procuring?
Man, if I could answer that question, I wouldn't be working here.
Well,
go ahead.
There's a partial answer to that. I mean, you could always do what you had to do with some of the say, the uniform law stuff.
Hmm?
You and he could enter into a license that allows you to put it on email, so you're getting something for it, as opposed to a per-use. I don't know how your license works for them, but I mean, so it's possible. John comes up with some money from somebody.
I mean, it just seems to me if this is a community platform, and we have the best practitioners in the world giving opening statements, giving closings, entering evidence. We have real-time feeds of evidence that's synced with the video. I mean, to me, it represents just kind of an unprecedented opportunity to really add value on top of that to get a community value added.
Well, a few years back, I had some conversation with Court TV about this exact same idea, and we looked at the quality of their feeds, and they weren't that good. You know what I mean? It was like thousands of hours of crap, and then 5 seconds of something that you could actually use in an educational setting. And so,
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm not disputing what you're saying, other than it's not as simple. It's not that simple to find the nuggets that an instructor will want to grab and then put in front of their students.
That's why that's part of the problem, is that, and that's what William and Mary and what we're undergoing right now at the editorial staff. We're crawling through and we're looking at the best opening statement. And we're adding editorial content. So professors say every time he walks 4 steps to the right and stops during his closing argument, he's talking about damages. Look at how he does this. It gives the jury an indication that he's going to be talking about damages, and it really creates an impression. So adding kind of editorial content on top of the trial video.
Sort of the director's commentary of the DVD.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a small set of people doing this now. And what to me, it's like, what if we open this up to the law school world? Imagine the type of educational benefit that could come from that.
Well, there's a question we haven't tackled yet, and we're going to have to sooner or later tackle, but it's probably not immediately, which is what is the business model here of the Langdell project. I think there's a point where we're going to get to that conversation and we're going to look at our law school is going to pay on a per use basis so that we have a revenue stream to share with others or not. So, we're not at that point yet. We will get to that point. We would love everybody in this room's feedback on, would the schools, basically pay for Langdell in a way that replaces existing casebooks that we would then have revenue to share with contributors, etc. So, but we're not there yet. So it's definitely something to consider. Absolutely, and we'd love everybody's input into how to make that happen.
Paul, you've had your hand up a zillion
I wanted
minutes.
to sort of harken back to and echo what sort of John said earlier, where Langdell has to confront the grand pressures in our business is, as somebody mentioned, this stuff doesn't count, right? And if anything, over the last 10 years, movement has been even more that scholarship is what counts, and there are powerful incentives for faculty, and especially the elite schools, those faculty that hope to be elite schools, to sort of not spend the time. He mentioned that so much of this talk has been about faculty who want to create their own course packs and want to do all of this fancy stuff. Those people don't get rewarded for that activity. And so I guess I encourage you folks to think about, is Langdell only for those folks who are battling against the type of history and are doing this out of altruistic, notions of teaching? I think Langdell also ought to think about, how can you make it easy for the professor, who has, John mentioned, right, the incentives are to spend as little time teaching as you can, so you can get onto the other areas where you're being ordered for. Can Langdell make it easy for that person to say, well, I don't want to be the personal doctor, I don't want to spend hundreds of hours typing stuff. I'd like to get a casebook that I know is popular and a big name, and I feel it's written it, so I can pump that and focus on that. It seems to me if Langdell matured where somebody could easily go there and through reputational means easily adopt something out of Langdell as their course package. That's where you would have greater market success. If we could somehow convince folks using Langdell isn't any harder than choosing Casebook off the shelf, that you sort of have the package. Here's grants on income tax. You could go in Langdell and sort of grants as assembled packages there that he uses when he teaches. That it's sort of faculty could easily go in there and extract from there those kind of materials. I think that's of greater hope than sort of hoping that you'll have a large number of sort of faculty willing to invest the time to themselves.
No, I appreciate that viewpoint, and we obviously concur in terms of the need to base the both teaching and creating these materials. What I find astounding is the more people I talk to, the more I hear the exact same sentiments from all levels of the academy, whether you're talking about top-tier schools or whatever tier schools, that it's a kind of a unfortunate kind of conspiracy of science around not acknowledging how much everybody actually commits to teaching. And it's a sad state when I think you can express that in these kind of closed circles, but actually I feel like if you sat people down in a big group and asked everybody, where should we be in terms of the teaching, frankly, it's not just cynical, lip service to the idea that we should all be concentrating more on teaching. I actually believe that the vast majority of professors do commit to good teaching. And what we're trying to do with E-Langdell is to lower the amount of energy that it takes to make that commitment into a reality. I think when you talk to professors, like what you're describing, so many express frustration that they can't do more, or that they can't have a little bit do more. And so that's really what we're trying to do with E-Langdell, is to unlock all of that potential that's out there. Professors really do care. And we want to be a tool that helps them take that and do something with it. So I absolutely appreciate that.
Well, I'm not suggesting that the sort of faculty don't care. No, I'm saying that they get rewarded for X, and they also
of course
do Y.
Of course.
People care about it, and they're just looking for efficient ways to do it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with E-Langdell, is to make it more efficient and easier for people to contribute smaller amounts. You don't have to write a whole casebook before you can publish a casebook. You can publish a chapter, you can publish half a chapter, and make a meaningful contribution to the teaching of the area of knowledge and development and care. So it has to.
And I guess what I'm arguing is, you ought to be not only targeting the contributors, but people who want to make withdrawals. That may be
of course, there's no question. Let me just ask a question, especially those of you who are coming in from the library perspective. What kind of partnership do you imagine being possible there in terms of working between the libraries and E-Langdell? And I raise that partly because we have a unique opportunity to partner between E-Langdell and Langdell, the library at Harvard. And as some of you know, the executive director of the Berkman Center is leaving the Berkman Center to head up library information at Harvard. So there's this unique opportunity where we're going to have a great chance to partner with the Langdell. And we would love to be able to partner with all of the libraries and all of the law schools, but we don't actually have any idea what that means. So, like, what would be a viable and valuable partnership between something like E-Langdell and the libraries that are at every law school out there right now? What kind of collaboration do you think?
Go ahead, Sally.
I would think a lot would be done because librarians, do research guides and manuals and teach.
Pathfinders.
And we do all of this, very similar things. And again, I would like to be able to go, if somebody's got a really great research guide on legislative history, I'd like to pull from that rather than all of us again recreating, the wheels. And I can do something great. The Florida libraries can do something great for Florida that anybody can pick up rather than, again, recreating. And somebody from New York may want, how we do it in Florida. So no, I think there's a lot of opportunities.
And is there a problem with the library? I mean, certainly everybody says when everyone wants to withdraw, is the library also interested in depositing?
Librarians are more used to providing, contributing to the community. So.
Okay.
Yes.
So just ask.
Well,
And that's why we love them.
Also, on some of the things we do, it's not, obviously we feel some reputational, but we're doing things that, maybe a 10-page guide that we're doing that, you know, it's not our whole life's work. And so, and this actually would probably, for librarians, if you, you know, even if you did an SSRN, which is, you know, sometimes is a little drives you nuts, but, you know, it does, you could see a whole range of people and what they're doing, and that would even, I think, be useful too for people to know what people are doing in their libraries.
Are libraries putting their research guides into SSRN?
No, we actually, the academics have tried over the years, the academic section of the AALL, of putting our guides and syllabuses and PowerPoints, you know, kind of in our own type of thing. But to have something where it's kept up, it's easy to use, you know, pretty much everybody's a member of CALI would be, I think, and if it were easy to throw it in there, you know, because everybody has things electronic these days.
Sure, Word format.
And actually, faculty, I mean, everybody could use it. If you wanted to put something in your class about, here's how I do a legislative history on X, Y, or Z, or, you know, the bankruptcy laws, you know, you could pop that into your class, you know, pretty easily.
I believe pro ses would be actually quite actively using that stuff.
Is the goal to get more content? It's driving the
Could be. I mean, you know, that's...
No. I can be explicit. No, not quantity of content's not the goal. It's quality of education. So there's an output beyond E-Langdell that we're actually going for, which is to improve the teaching for lawyers or the quality of education of lawyers.
Yeah, no, I was just getting the goal of partnership with the Harvard Library and with other.
Well, that's a reputation play.
Well, I mean, and not to be parochial, but one thing I'm aware of at Harvard, I'm sure this is going on in other libraries, and they're presenting on it. Have they already presented on it, or are they about to present on it? Where there's a session that the Harvard folks are doing today or tomorrow on the libraries themselves are starting to affirmatively, like, basically creating these research guides, putting them into courses. So instead of the professors asking, can we have your library materials, they're instead putting them in automatically and making the professors say, no, take it out, which of course the professors don't do. So in some ways, the libraries are taking a more affirmative step. I'm sure that's only one of many examples out there of libraries affirmatively playing more of a role in education. We'd love to see that happen with textbooks as well. So, hopefully it's not.
I think we're done.